Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this discussion about transforming culture through video collaboration. We're coming to you live from the Tech Museum of Innovation in San Jose, California. I'm Tim Ritchie, the Tech's president and CEO, and I'm joined by Scott Wharton, the vice president for video collaboration at Logitech, and Eric Yuan, the founder and CEO of Zoom Video Communications. And just to get things going, guys, you've both spent so much of your professional career doing collaboration technology, collaboration tools, and video conferencing in particular. So what got you into this industry and what stokes your passion now? Scott, why don't we start with you?
So earlier in my career, I was doing product management for the very first company that did voice over IP. I was managing a product called Internet Phone, where our tagline was talk for free over the internet. And we had just added video to the product. And all of our engineers were in Israel. And I would really struggle with the interaction with these engineers. I would go over and visit with them for a week, and I would make all this progress in person. And as soon as I would go back, everything would start to unwind. And then we added video conferencing to our little software, and we were able to get video over a 28.8 modem and audio. And even though it was on the size of a postage stamp and the quality was pretty awful compared to today, it just revolutionized how I was able to do my job and work with people. And then I became hooked ever since personally, and the impact that we can have on global collaboration, and been doing it for now a couple of decades, and I still love it more than ever.
So I want to come back to that in just a second, because it does seem to me that video changes everything. But what about you, Eric? How did you get started and what keeps you going now?
So that's a long story. I was born in China and in Shandong province, Mountain Tai. So I went to a local hometown university, and back to 1987. So my girlfriend, she was in another college, a different province. And I can only saw her probably twice a year. So it took me like more than 10 hours train, right, to see her. It's so hard. And back then I was thinking about, say, someday in the future, if I can hold a device, one click, I can see you, can talk with you, that would be great. And more like a daydream. And then I came here in Silicon Valley in 1997 and joined WebEx as one of the first several founding engineers. Ultimately, I became vice president of engineering. We built the first generation collaboration solution, and the company went public. We sold to Cisco. I was there for another 4.5 years. And then I left Cisco to start Zoom. When we built Zoom, at that time, I realized, wow, I think my dream is coming true now. Finally, we can build something to enable video collaboration, video communication.
So we have a romance, we have effective work, so many things, but it does seem to me that the desire for effective communication is significantly enhanced somehow by video itself. And so what is it about video that seems to change everything? Because you can communicate by email, you can communicate by voice, but somehow when you can see each other, something changes. So what is it? What's the magic of video?
Well, I guess it's part of being human. You know, give an example. Some people will say, if I'm in a meeting, I don't really need video. It's not good enough. Then I say, okay, I'm going to challenge you. Go into your next meeting, have 8 people sit around a room, and then put blindfolds on and see what your experience is. And then they say, come on, Scott, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? And I say, that's what an audio call is. You're blindfolded. So to be human is to be able to look at each other and you get all the context and information, and you need it. And then you not just need it for productivity, we need it just to interact with humans to see what's going on in the world.
It's very true, Scott, right on. See, like experience like this, we can see each other, right? Eye contact really important, right? It's going to give you a very intimate experience. And also based on our test, every time, if you just use a voice, use an audio call, if you do not turn on the video, guess what? Every time, 30% of those participants, they are multitasking.
Yes.
See, like Scott and I, we might have audio call, right? And also you join. When 3 of us were talking something, guess what? When Scott is talking, probably already doing some sales, right? Always like that. It's human nature. I think a video can fix that problem. And also make your meeting more productive. And with the eye contact. I think we truly believe video is a new voice. In 5 years, I think just the video, the audio call, voice call will be gone. Every call will have video.
Yeah, you'll say, why were we doing that before? It'd be like saying, all right, everybody turn off their TVs, just go home and listen to radio, which radio is great, but there's a reason why most people watch TV. It's just, it's rich.
Yeah, it mimics, the human, the interaction experience like this. Yeah.
All right, so the goal is still elusive, simple, clear, easy video collaboration globally. You both have global perspectives, Israel, China, everything. It's still elusive. What is kind of getting in the way? Why is it still so difficult for so many of us to get it in this way that is simple and clear and effective? What are the things that are getting in the way?
Well, I would say for a long time, there were things like cost. The cost of the equipment was too expensive. It was complicated. You needed, as we like to joke, a Captain Video at their cape to come in and set everything up because it was too hard. And of course, there were bandwidth issues where if you were in China or the early days and calling to Israel, there just wasn't enough bandwidth. I would say today, all of those issues are mostly solved, and a lot of it by our companies respectively. I think the biggest issue now is just awareness. People just don't know how great an experience it can be. And even if they do, I think they just don't, sometimes they just don't understand. Sometimes I see the analogy is kind of like when TiVo first came out. People would say, oh, you need TiVo, it's so great. And people would say, I said, what's TiVo? Because you don't know what it is. And then you use it and then you go, oh my God, how did I live without it? So video is a lot of those ways where people are just used to audio. They're used to having terrible interactions. And then when you move to a great interaction, they say, I don't know how I ever live without it. So I think the biggest challenge that we have right now is people just mostly haven't experienced it. Yeah. The good thing is they've experienced it on the consumer side, but a lot of them haven't done it on the business side. But that's changing a lot as people do a FaceTime call. And then they say, why can't I have that in business?
Yeah, I think Scott is right on. I think awareness is the key part because like I see 5 or 6 years ago, if you had one of the bad experience, you say, wow, I don't want to try that anymore. Actually, technology-wise, today is ready. Silicon Valley are so many great startup companies. Two favorite companies, in my view, is Envision and Zapier. Both of them are doing very well. It's great business. But guess what? They don't have any physical office. They have employees all over the world. They live with the video world. They turn on the video, they use video conferencing. They feel like in the same physical office. It works very well.
So I was going to actually ask for some success stories, and that's a really good one that you've told. I'd like to unpack a little bit more, but let's think about it a little bit differently. If you can think about a culture that truly was transformed, it went from one thing to another thing because of the way they integrated video collaboration tools in their entire industry or their group or their organization. Give us some examples of how a culture was transformed before and after, if something can come to your mind.
I think, take Zoom, for example. We have office in Kansas City, Santa Barbara, also have office in Denver. So I did not travel there even once yet. So every day I'm just using, Zoom. I use video call to talk with our employees there. And even if I never travel there, we feel like we're in the same office for a long, long time. And so we have a great connection, great experience. And otherwise, every month probably I need to travel there. I think it saves me a lot of time. And employees do not feel like, they are, say, not in the headquarters, they do not feel engaged. Because if you turn on the video, you feel like, especially if it works, you feel like, wow, in the same office, you can build the trust. That's why your culture is getting better and better.
Yeah, I think there are so many examples. I mean, one that just comes to mind is we were working with a school district, which is a joint customer, and it's in Texas, and it's really widely distributed. And whenever they wanted to do training, they would have people drive in for 3 hours, stay in a hotel, and then they would have to wait to do training every 6 months or a year. Now, by using these simple tools that are relatively easy and expensive to use, they can get everyone together and be more productive, do training, everybody sees each other. So I think it's not just about the cost savings, it's the time, it's the productivity, it's the richness of the interaction. And I think we see it across every type of the world, whether it's a startup or big companies, and it's happening in Asia and Europe. So I think there's this phenomenon that even in the last, I would say, year or two, right, where we've seen it just go all over the place, where people are realizing, okay, there's a productivity gain that you get, that we're not only talking about saving money on travel and the ROI, it's human beings are what's the hardest thing in sharing information. So doing that in a better way.
And also, by the way, so like if you use the video call, right, you can have a green background, right, and also you turn on your virtual background and also make it fun. Actually, those participants, they do not know where you are. It's a very nice virtual background. I feel like I'm working at home. I can have my background as a beach, right? So it's a very nice experience.
Or if you have the beach, you can have the background as the office.
That's true.
I actually had this experience with one of our board members. It was a Zoom call. He has a green background, and he keeps changing the background. And I never know what he's going to be on Mount Everest, or he's going to be, as you say, and it's very fun. But it also, let's get back to this most kind of fundamental thing that you brought up, Eric, which is that actually video collaboration actually can improve trust. Now, trust, if you can move at the speed of trust, then everything changes. And that's a very deep cultural thing. So once again, the subject is how you transform culture through video collaboration. So what else besides or in addition to trust do you feel like gets built in a culture? So there's trust, and what else happens when you communicate via video?
I think first of all, for almost every company, have branch office, right? You have remote employees. They feel more engaged, right? If you have webinar, your CEO always turn on the video. I think the employee feel like they can see your CEO, right? So with that, the experience-wise, very intimate. That's one thing. Another thing, also making your meeting productivity much better. If you do not turn on the video, just a voice call, very often could be the 1 hour or 2 hours meeting. Right? If you turn on the video and all the participants are fully engaged, they do not do multitasking anymore, right? And make the meeting much shorter. I think overall the productivity improvement and also intimate experience.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think sometimes there's a feeling in business that in order for us to really decide things, we really need to get together, whether it's an internal meeting or you're negotiating a big deal. So you have to wait for everyone to fly out there and schedule it in time. With video, you could do that rapidly. You could have meetings every day. So there's kind of the speed that I think companies that will embrace that will go a lot faster. The other thing is we have this idea, which is, if you think about it, it's ridiculous. All the best employees in the world that I could ever hire are within a 20-mile radius. Everybody else in the world is unqualified. That's kind of the world that we've grown up in. Whereas I think what we're empowering is that if you have a tribe and you have a member of your tribe that can be in Kansas City or in Shanghai, they can be part of that group and still be productive, as opposed to saying, nope, I have to hire them here. And I think in the past, when you were doing audio calls, you could hire people remotely, but they just weren't part of the meeting. You'd have 5 people in the meeting, someone would be on an audio call. They're not really engaged, participating as an equal member. Now we're able to do that. So you get the best and brightest of people anywhere. And that could be in developed countries, but also I think increasingly developing countries, where those people now have an opportunity to engage in the world economy in a way they didn't before. I find that to be really empowering, in that you're not just being able to have the luck of being born in the US or Europe. You can be born anywhere, and that you could have an opportunity to be successful.
You can collaborate and still get a job done, right? No matter where you are.
So you talked about global opportunities, and that raises some issues the tech is very concerned about, which are global problems. In a world with 8 billion people, the problems will become increasingly global, and the solutions will have to become increasingly global, which will, exactly as you say, Scott, require great minds collectively all over. What are the impediments for global collaboration? Are they largely technical? Are they largely civic? Is it language? What's getting in the way of global collaboration? Or is it, in fact, are there some great success stories to talk about that as well?
Well, I would say that sometimes it's time zones. Just having a meeting, like we have one of our Logitech leadership meetings, but it's at 7 a.m. today. We had it on Wednesday, and then 4 in Europe at 11 in China. So it's that can be a challenge. But I think a lot of it is if you have someone on audio or they need to fly in, I think that can be really difficult. So as Eric said, bringing everybody up as an equal participant in the meeting. So I was able to participate in my meeting today, but I did it from home. And because we had it on video, it was able to be of great quality. I think the other thing could be bandwidth. So if you live in most of the developed countries, you have great bandwidth. I think we were talking earlier about people in Africa, and you said 1 out of 3. And
by 2070, 1 out of 3 people on the planet will live on the continent of Africa.
So today I would say if you're hiring remote people, it's easier to hire someone in Kansas City than it is in Kenya.
Right.
And partly that's due to infrastructure like the internet. But that's changing pretty rapidly. I gave an example that we were talking about earlier about Vietnam, where I was there 4 years ago and the internet was terrible. And then I did a Zoom call with someone a few months ago, and they said, oh, the internet is now better in Ho Chi Minh City than it is in Silicon Valley. So I think that's changing pretty rapidly, and that will probably be one of the last impediments to bringing people into the global economy from these places.
What about your perspective on global cooperation?
I think language is also another barrier. See, like even you have all hands meeting, headquarters and sitting invited, right? You have attendees coming from all over the world, from Japan, China, maybe the Europe, right? So to speak the same languages could be challenging. That's why we need to work harder, right? To make sure improve the technology, right? Give it a real-time live translation, right? When you speak and translate to German, translate to Chinese or Japanese, I think that will help as well. Otherwise, you really, as Scott mentioned, the time zone plus the language barrier, I think still will cause some problems. It's not a frictionless experience yet.
Yeah,
I think it's a good point because I think part of the way that Eric and I, when we talk about our teams, is we like to say that we're in the meetings business, not in the video business. Because if you think about it for video, you just say, okay, if I have a bandwidth and the right camera and the right software, you're done.
Right.
But I think we all know from our experience in meetings that there's a lot that leaves it to be desired.
Yeah.
Whether it's the remote person seeing someone in the back or having the right audio or maybe doing simultaneous translation. So there's a huge amount of things that we can do to keep making things better. So I would say we're at a baseline now where it's really good enough that anybody can contribute it, but we're a long way away from making it amazing.
So that raises sort of the AI question. Something like simultaneous translation, I'm sure, is even more elusive, but even more important. So to what extent are you incorporating R&D with your AI partners out there? How much is that a part of your business here?
I think AI is very important. So the reason why I see we talk about the face-to-face meeting and online like a video meeting like Zoom and one thing actually, two things I think the problem is, first of all, no matter how good that video collaborating experience is, I still cannot shake hands with you, right? I cannot give you a hug, right? You do not have that functionality, even if you are working on that. Another thing is more like a AI technology. Say like for 1 hour meeting, when you switch the topic, right? Scott and I, we may not understand, based on the face detection, we see, sending a real-time signal, hey, team, please slow down. And Scott and Eric, they do not get it. They give you real-time feedback. After the meeting is over, we'll tell you how to make this meeting more productive. All those cannot be done without AI technology.
And then what about the sort of the more embodied experience? I think probably everyone would love the day of the hologram appearing and the hologram having the conversation. So if you were here holographically, is that just a pipe dream, or is that something that could actually be coming our way in the next decade?
I think if you look at what you need for holographic technology, you need bandwidth, you need multiple cameras to capture you, and you need some device to be able to see someone so you're not wearing some ridiculous VR-like headset. All those, I think, I would say 5 or 10 years, you'll see them, so that we'll be able to have this meeting here 5 or 10 years from now. We'll be able to beam in from our homes or offices, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It'll be that good. So I don't think it's all that far away.
I think it's got to write down. I think in 5 to 10 years, even if 3 of us were sitting at home, if I want to shake hands with you, you can feel like that, right? If Scott is eating his pasta, also can smell that as well. I think this is going to happen in the next several years. All the sensor technology, AI, AR, really make the video collaborating experience even better than face-to-face meeting.
I would add one thing on the AI that we're working on that we're pretty excited about is if you think about most video meetings today, they're centered around a single camera in the front. And unlike the experience we're having here where we look back and forth, the cameras, I mean, I'll speak to ours, they're relatively dumb. They don't really know where to look. So we're trying to use AI to effectively what we say, we want Steven Spielberg in a room. So what would Steven Spielberg do? In this case, we have almost Steven Spielberg. We have great camera people here with multiple cameras and equipment, always having the right shot. But in most video meetings, you can't have that. So what we want to do is use AI to have this idea of multiple cameras and always being able to find out where the action is. So we like to say that our model is less Silicon Valley, it's more Hollywood. If you think about it, in Hollywood, they've spent 100 years figuring out where to put the camera in the right shots, that it's not moving in too much of a jerky way. So we're really using AI to be able to do that. And we just did our first instance where we use AI to basically look at the room. So when you walk into a room, you don't need to pick up the remote control to move it around. It'll automatically see you. And if someone comes into the meeting, it'll get wider. If they leave, it'll get narrower. But that's just the beginning, I think, of what we can do to use AI to make a collaboration session better.
I think it's called the Logitech lab, right? Has a lot of very sophisticated technology, I think, in the pipeline. I think it's really beautiful for the next several years.
So we have a bunch of questions coming in and once again, if you want to submit a question, there's a Q&A function on the Zoom screen, so send it in to us. But I think this is an interesting question, which is how does video collaboration impact the pace? I guess we've sort of touched on it before, of which organizations perform, but I guess not specifically. If you can think about it maybe in terms of the R&D cycle or some pace cycle that is significantly increased because of video collaboration technologies. Can you think about that and give me an example?
I can share with you two examples, right? Like in terms of pace of driving up the decision-making process, right? Quite often you have a very important meeting. If you have video collaboration, everybody engaged, right? 30 minutes, you're going to make a decision.
Yeah.
If you do not turn on the video, guess what? Can you repeat it one more time? Everybody do not listen to you. Multitasking, that's one problem.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you repeat that exactly?
I couldn't hear you with what they were doing.
Exactly, or I'm muted or something like that, right? That's one example. Another example is quite often you want to hire the top talent engineers, right? But as Scott mentioned, you cannot find those people in the city, right? But those people are available all over the world, right? How can you get those people involved to collaborate to get something done, right? If you have tools like this, you can quickly see, oh, I do not need to hire people here anymore. I can hire people, say, from Japan, from Bangalore, from Tel Aviv, right? You can still get work done if you have a tools like this. Otherwise, you need to wait. Oh, I need to find an engineer here. It will take much longer. That's why you look at the whole world, where the talent's coming from, using the tools to enable that.
Yeah, we hired one of the best audio engineers in the world because I think, as most people know, video is important, but audio is almost more important. And he happened to be an Italian guy living in the UK, but we were able to bring him on and make him productive because of the fact that we're using video every day. Yeah. I'd also say that there are companies like ours that have to deal, ideally you'd have everyone in the same room in Silicon Valley, but that's not always the case. Like we deal with a lot of Chinese supply chain. So we have engineers in Taiwan, we have manufacturing in China, and you can't have, not only can you not have everyone in the same room, you don't want to because you want to take advantage of these centers of expertise. So I think having video to be able to have those meetings where you can make those decisions, see things, and across cultures is part of what's really made us speed up from an R&D point of view.
Let's get back to, there's another question that's a real culture type question, which is, do you think video makes people less confrontational? Or I would put it differently. Do you think video helps them handle crucial confrontations better?
Much better. I gave one example. So it's also my personal story as well. When we started Zoom, several years ago, and once we have a very unhappy customer, they sent an email and really upset. And I said, sorry, actually, about the inconvenience, right? Let's have a Zoom call. I want to understand what had happened to you. He's really upset. And literally, based on the email, I know that when we turn on the video, guess what? It completely changed.
Yeah.
It's so nice. The tone, everything changed. And after the meeting, we become friends. So I would imagine if we do not turn on the video, guess what? He probably will yell at me also because something happened, right? Yeah. So I think a video can really change that.
Yeah, I had a personal experience. I mean, I have a lot of those experiences too, but one personally where there was a very difficult decision that was coming up, and I was traveling in a different part of the country, and everybody said, we have to decide it. So they had the meeting, and I was in a hotel room, and it was on audio, and I could just feel that I was not able to get my point across, that people couldn't see me, I couldn't see them, and I lost making the decision, end up being a disaster, the outcome. And I knew it was, but I just knew there was almost nothing I can do. And that really, part of that motivated me to start my own company, to be able to get more involved in video, just because I felt that if it was just happening to me, there were other people around the world that were suffering and companies that were suffering from that.
It's interesting because I think we can all think with chagrin about our worst mistakes on email, or we can have many examples where people were their worst selves. But on video, I suppose you're always wanting to be your best self. And that's not such a bad thing for the workplace culture. So here's a very specific question about the new technologies for the classroom. You talked about schools, and clearly in terms of an industry that needs to be improved, education, not only in this country, but really globally, is going to be so important for expanding economic opportunities to improve how we do education. So can you all expand on new technologies for the classroom? Start with you, Eric.
I think like, we partner with Scott's team, right? We have conf room solutions, Zoom rooms with the Logitech camera. Essentially, every classroom, if you have a solution like this, guess what? Quite often, you can invite a guest speaker, right? To share, the experience, best practice, knowledge transfer to the students. Otherwise, you need to call somebody to physically join the classroom. It's not feasible in most of the cases, right? I think another area is more like a whiteboard. And also today, you need to walk onto the stage to draw something. So if you have that solution, every student, this is one click. You can draw from your iPhone, your iPad, and also everybody will see that from the screen. I think overall with video collaboration and also with the whiteboard, the functionality, all the classroom, it will become not only a physical classroom anymore. It's becoming a virtual classroom. You can get all the participants. Either the teacher can join at home, or maybe the teacher, or maybe the students from all over the world can join as well. I think that every physical classroom will become a virtual classroom. I think that's the key.
And if I were this person asking the question about the new technologies for the classroom, it sounds once again like the answer mainly is about awareness, because the technologies exist. I guess there's a price point question for public schools and classrooms. So do you see the technologies getting to the point where they are affordable across the public school systems, for instance, in this country or across the world, or are they already affordable and people just don't know about it?
Yeah, I would say the irony for our business is most of our big education work is in India and China.
Yes.
And not in the central cities, but in the rural areas, because it may be hard for our listeners to relate to this, but in a lot of these places, they don't have trained teachers in rural areas in India and China. So they're doing a lot of their work over video, and it could be for the price of a webcam. So they could spend $20, $50, $100, could be more, could be $1,000, but I think the technology's gotten to a point now where you can implement some of these things, but it's not happening here because we're relatively wealthy and we can have teachers in every classroom. It's happening in other places where we don't have it. I'm also a big fan of the flipped classroom, whereas, and this is much more cultural today, where our education system is done like we did 150 years ago, where a teacher comes in and lectures and then you go home and do work by yourself. I think it'd be much better to have you do the work and then you should have a discussion, because the learning should be about the interaction. Well, some of the ways to do that are video, where you can have the teacher do it, but maybe you have like you said, maybe you have the expert come in over video, and if you want to talk about some historical event, get the person who actually was part of it to video in, instead of relying on each individual teacher. I think as distance becomes less of an issue, you could do more of that.
It's interesting you put it that way, Scott, because really what you're saying is that the paradigm needs to shift to take advantage of the existing technologies. It's not really new technologies for the classroom. It's a new classroom for the technologies that do happen. And I think it's amazing to think that the pickup of the technologies can be in what are probably very poor places in rural China and rural India, that's even more accessible to them. And I think that actually provides a great hope. If we can think about the classroom differently, then we can take advantage of the technologies better. Here's another question for you, Eric. So what are the technological drivers underpinning the growth of video? The technological drivers underpinning the growth of video?
I think, first of all, it's awareness. That's definitely thing. Just purely from a technology perspective, like how to further optimize technology to handle the very low bandwidth, right? Very unreliable network. Like in my home, when my kids all watch Netflix, my Wi-Fi will have a problem, right? So how to fix that problem? Either you have a new Wi-Fi, or we need to optimize our software, meaning your data loss rate could be 70%. Audio is choppy, video does not work. Can we build a technology? Even if you have very unreliable network, we still can make audio clear, right? Video may not be as good as higher bandwidth. At least you can talk, right? And I think that it's not there yet, but I think that we are working very hard. I think the bandwidth and also the device sometimes, something's very low in the device. 10 years ago, you see the Windows XP very low in the device, but we do support that. We still have an engineer working on that to optimize, because you cannot only look at the Silicon Valley. In other part of the world, a lot of people are still using very low in the PC. We need to support that as well. Overall, it's a computing device is getting better, but we need to support a low in the device. Plus, we need to support the very unreliable network. If we can completely fix those two things, I think technology is absolutely fine now.
Yeah, I would add to that that it used to be that for companies and organizations that wanted really high quality video, it was a $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 investment per room. So what they would do is they would put it in only the small amount of rooms, like the boardroom, and on all the other rooms would have a telephone or a screen. Today, you can get the same quality as you used to spend for a few years ago for $100,000 for under $1,000, which is amazing. But it's not only the economics of it, it's also the ease of use. So you can use now a regular computer and things like USB. So anybody can plug things in and use them without having an IT background. Yeah. And our CEO likes to joke that for video conferencing, you would never walk into a room and say, there's room for 6 people, but we only bought 4 chairs because we couldn't make the ROI work.
Right, right.
So video is now the cost of a chair.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to the point now where every room you're going to have it, because how do you justify not having it? You have the chairs, got to have the video there too.
Are you finding that colleges and universities are coming to you, especially in this country? The cost of traditional college education is spiraling out of control. So things like Udacity, of course, are cropping up and others. But what about sort of a flagship, university, the small college in the Midwest of the United States? Are some of them coming to you saying, help us do our model differently because of the things coming down?
I think so. I mean, I think we're still in the transition right now where it's not live. They're doing more of the recording, and kind of that classic Udacity course on AI where they had 150,000 people.
Right.
I actually tried doing it, but once I got into complicated Bayesian statistics, I put it on hold. But most of the people who were taking that class were not in the US. They were in Russia and China and India. So I think you'll see more and more of, again, it's the kind of the example where the developing countries are going to probably leapfrog us because they need to do it more. We have the benefit of having more money than most here, so we can afford it. But I think it'll happen here too, but probably will happen in China and India and other places first.
Yeah,
and is happening.
Yeah, it's happening now. Yeah.
That's where we're having a lot of our education sales outside of the US.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Where are your biggest markets outside of the United States?
So we're a very global business. We operate in 100 countries. Ironically, we're almost equal now between North America, Europe, and Asia. So North America is a little bit bigger than Asia, but Asia is growing a lot faster. So I bet in the next year or two, we're going to be about equal. One of the ironies is that China is one of our biggest markets. You would think that we couldn't compete in China, but we're beating a lot of the Chinese companies for video
because you have a best product.
Because we have the best products.
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys are doing the same thing too, winning in China as well, right?
We focus on the North America. That's how we started. And Japan, UK, Australia, France, Germany still, I think, is probably our biggest market outside the United States. And also, if you look at the education sector, look at just the top 200 nationwide university here in the United States. 96% are using video collaboration Zoom, right? And also, over the past 12 to 18 months, we see the K-12, all those community colleges as well. They all going to take on the video because they cannot get all the students together in the physical campus. And plus, sometimes the teacher also not available, right? So how to make sure enable all those campus with video technology. This is happening very quickly now.
Another question from the audience picks up on AI. And one of the things, and I think you referred to facial recognition a little bit earlier, and that is, when do you think we'll see facial recognition to start the meetings? When we will see an era of no more controllers, no more starting a meeting by punching numbers on a keypad, but where you just sit in, everyone's there, and poof, the meeting starts? I
think it's may not be the technology challenge. It's more like it's kind of like from an end user experience problem. So today, if you are in front of a camera, we can detect your face very well. Say this is Scott, this is Tim. But the problem is when you walk into the conf room, you do not look at the camera, right? If you look at the other place, it's hard to detect or Tim is walking into the conf room. That's why how to fix that usability issues, as Scott mentioned, probably we should have multiple cameras somewhere, right? And face detection like an iPhone or iPad, it works very well. But how to apply that to the real time, like a collaboration conf room experience, I think will take some time. So ultimately, I think we need to work together, see with Scott's the lab, right? So where to set up a camera, make sure no matter where, how you walk into the conference room, always can detect your face. Mm-hmm. I think that's a little bit challenging for now.
I'd add that I think it's not as much of a technology issue as it is a security and privacy issue. So we can already do facial detection today in our cameras. We have a camera that does authentication that will allow you to open your computer without typing in a password. The problem is you need some database somewhere that somebody owns, and who owns the database, and what are the privacy issues of if you're logging in, who owns knowing where you are all the time. And I think people are kind of a little bit scared of that right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably an understatement. People are really worried about the loss of privacy, and we love the tools and we hate the loss of privacy. And people think, of course, about facial recognition, but there's also the Internet of Things where we're sort of hemorrhaging data all the time into sensors. So when you think about some of the ethical questions, you want your technologies to be effective and you want them to be great. And then there's the negative side, because the more effective and the more good they are, the more they're going to capture someone's privacy. I'm not sure that you can do anything about it, but when you do think about it, where does your mind and where does your technology go on these privacy issues?
Well, it probably runs the gamut. I mean, part of it is we're building in a lot of our cameras now either with privacy shutters on them so people don't have to put the ridiculous duct tape on them or Band-Aids or whatever they do these days. We're also building a new camera that when instead of trying to put a cover on it, it just faces down. Mm-hmm. So people have that feeling of it's not pointing at me, because the people have this sense of, is it on?
Yes.
Well, I know it says it's not on, but is it really not on? So I think we have to try to address the changing thinking around that. And then I think the same around facial recognition. I think we want to make sure that people feel comfortable that if they're giving out their information about their face, where is it going, who owns it? So trying to take some care for that.
Yeah, I think you're right on. It's a little bit tricky because, as you mentioned, as we further improve technology, quite often you have so many flexible features. Guess what? You lose the privacy, right? Right. But how to make sure to balance that? I think it's more like a usability improvement, and also some hardware, like you mentioned, the new camera. I think it's it will take a little bit longer time to let people feel very comfortable. Right? When you further improve the technology, at the same time, let the people who are using technology, let them aware of that, the privacy issue. Quite often, we do not know that until something already happened. It's too late.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true for all of us who are carrying smartphones. We love the functionality of smartphones. We love the fact that we can ask Siri any question, anytime, understanding, of course, that Siri's listening to everything all the time. So it's a complicated world we're getting into. And then you compound that with the next thing I want to ask you about, which is the importance of government and public problem solving. So to what extent, on the positive side, and then we can get to the negative side in a second, but are governments reaching out to you for your technologies to improve their collaboration as they take on big problems, whether it's public health issues or transportation issues or environmental issues? Surely some of the biggest problem solvers in the world have to be governments. And so are they reaching out, and are they becoming more effective using video collaboration for problem solving?
I think absolutely right, because give one example, like a telemedicine, telehealth, right? Yes. It's given that, the doctors, I think a lot of rural, areas, people live very far away to the doctor, cannot have access to the doctor office. I think telemedicine is really helping that, right? Yes. To make sure, you do not need to travel, to see doctor, right? And it can leverage technology like a video and to talk with the patient. And also I remember there's a policy change for the reimbursement for insurance, right? Otherwise, no doctor wants to see the patient that way because he cannot get it reimbursed, right? I think that policy really helps that.
Yeah, and I'll add probably one that people don't know, telejustice. So we're doing a bunch of projects around the world. Some of them in Florida, some of our biggest ones actually in India, where if you think about the cost and complexity and security of taking someone who's in prison to a court for an arraignment. So very expensive, it's dangerous. You can do a video hearing and you get much swifter justice, it's cheaper and it's easier. And we're seeing huge projects around the world for something simple like that, but I think there'll be all sorts of applications now that it's almost free.
And then what about cross-government collaboration on a global challenge? Like, well, let's get back to health, for instance, like Ebola, or Zika
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Have you seen video conferencing capabilities being used effectively between, say, universities and governments in Africa and universities and governments in this country as they try to work on vaccines or antibodies and that sort of thing?
We, based on, we talk with so many customers, we see it's happening a lot in the private sector. Like a companies, right? They leverage the technology. I see, there's like a patient in Africa and maybe in Asia before they have surgery, right? They really want to talk to the best doctor in Stanford Hospital, right? And after 1 hour video call, they realize, oh, there's no need to have surgery anymore. I think it's happening a lot in the private sector. But in terms of cross-border, I think the government and the private sector, I think is happening now, but I think is not a mainstream yet.
No.
I'd say one of the things that I'd say all that stuff is happening, but one of the things that excites me about what we're doing together is that I think we all see that governments around the world are paralyzed in many ways, especially around things like climate change.
Yes.
And I think what a lot of us are realizing that we can't rely on governments alone to be able to change things, and we have to try to take things into our own hands.
Yeah.
So part of why I'm really excited about what we're doing together and what Logitech is doing is that we can innovate in a way that gives people the power to do the right thing, but not do it because somebody's beating them up or regulating them. They're doing it just because it's great, like it makes their life better. And I think I maybe gave the example earlier where if you have one person who could work from home 1 day a week, it could be 2 to 3% of all global carbon emissions. So when we talk about that at Logitech, we go, wow, that's really empowering. We could have a very small group make more impact than a country or the UN or other people. And I think we're doing it not because we're beating people up, we're doing it just because we're giving them something that's in their own selfish interest. So I like the fact that we're taking something that's in the private sector, but doing something that maybe the government can't do.
Yeah, that's a great example. Maybe, should talk with the government, like every country, like say like someday, just one day, 80 billion people, they all work at home, right? It's kind of called a world remote working at home day, something like that, right? So every government, they work together, right?
Well, in fact, people who are listening, we're together sponsoring the National Work From Home Day or International Work From Home Day on Wednesday, November 8th, October 8th.
Yeah.
So our companies are going to work from home, and we've got partners doing it. So hopefully we can get, if you want to do it with your partners around the world on the 8th, join us to work from home and show that it can be done.
That is a fabulous idea. I hadn't thought about the environmental impact of working from home. And I bet you that can be calculated on a global basis, and the impact, maybe it's already been calculated, that the impact would be staggering.
Here's a stat for you. All airplane travel around the world, if you add it all up in total, it's about 2% of carbon emissions. Driving, in California alone, 40% is transportation, and most of that is cars. So that's why I said if you just take 1 day a week, we're not saying, all right, everybody needs to radically shut down all our offices, but just every once in a while, kind of like what we did today, work from home in the morning, come in here, you didn't go into the office. That would have a radical ability to change how we emit carbon. And you could argue it's actually better, right? It's not worse.
Absolutely.
Oh, much better. So you are both fathers. You have 3 kids each, I think.
I have 2.
Two kids, three kids. And when you think 20 years from now, and your kids are making their way in the world, this is a big question. It's a big question. It's going to come back to video collaboration tools. But describe a little bit about what kind of world you want for your kids, what kind of world you want for your grandkids. And then we'll come back to how the collaboration tools will help us get there. Scott, you were sort of getting there a little bit just a minute ago. So just expand on that just a little bit. Eric, we'll start with you.
I would say in the future, so they can live wherever they want to live, but they do not feel like they live in other places, meaning they can leverage technology to communicate, to talk, to see any others, to want to go anywhere, just one click, right? I think overall technology will be behind the scene, make life much easier, and not driven by technology, driven by like flexibility and driven by the trust, because technology already there. I think today is still like a lot of technology problems. Down the road, I would think all those problems will be gone. And, they can live very far, somewhere. They do not feel like that. Still feel like people around them. I think that's that's my, imagination, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I mean, we talked about a lot of the benefits for what we're doing in video collaboration. For me, I think that we all know that climate change is possibly the biggest challenge for our time, for our generation. And I'm not that optimistic that governments can solve the problem. And I think it's going to be up to people innovating in Silicon Valley to be able to make a change. So I think part of what I want us to do and what we can do is if we can be able to make video so good that people feel like they can be just as productive or have just as great relationship by not always taking their bodies and moving it around. I think that could be our contribution and part of my contribution to that. I mean, I'll tell you a short story of how, where I think our North Star is. My son, a couple of years ago, he's 15, but he was 12. And we were watching the Golden State Warriors. You guys are a sponsor of the Warriors. And we were watching all these games, and it was the best season ever. And we hadn't been to a game yet. So I figured I would surprise him and say, hey, Reed, let's go to the game. Now, I thought he would be really excited about it. But he looks at me and he goes, no, I don't want to go. So I'm going, what? What do you mean you don't want to go? We love the Warriors. It's great. We should go. You need to tell me why you don't want to go. So he goes, well, because first of all, Dad, I know you're kind of a cheapskate, so you're going to be way up in the high seats. I'm not going to be able to see that well. And then we got to drive there and sit in traffic. He goes, and I love the play-by-play, and I love the multiple cameras. And I'm thinking about what he's describing this. He's basically saying that it's better than being there to be remote, which is kind of funny when you think about video conferencing in our whole careers. People always say, you know, video is kind of good, but it'll never be as good as being there. And here's this 12-year-old saying, nope, you're wrong. Better than being there. So we've kind of set our goal. We said, well, why do we have to be almost as good? Why don't we make it better than being there?
Yes.
So part of what does that mean? We're trying to take the same things about the Warriors game or a sporting event. So you have multiple cameras. You always have the great shot. You have information. You have one me in San Francisco, and you go, no, I'm going to do a Zoom call because it's better than being there. Yeah. That's kind of that's one of our goals and aspirations for Logitech, and I think we can do it.
So you guys are obviously optimistic. You believe in technology. You have felt it in the world that there's more a dystopian view, more distrust of technology, and that seems to be happening pretty quickly, especially when you have a platform like Facebook where they are just trying to figure out how to not let their technology be co-opted and used in negative ways. So some of the problems for technology are really, really giant. So I know that although you're optimistic about technology, you're also aware of this concern that people have, this distrust that people have. How would you address them? If some people who are sitting in here right now were saying, I don't think that's good that you don't want to go to the actual game. I don't think it's good that the camera is looking at me. And they started going down the list and were saying all the reasons technology is bad. How would you either comfort them or kind of reason them into a different view?
I think I'm very optimistic. I think given time, the problem will be fixed by itself. The reason why you look at today's workforce, over 1/3 of workforce in the United States are millennials. They grown up along with the mobile phone, with the text message, with the technology, right? I think down the road, I think as technology is getting better and better, I would say the problem be fixed by itself. More like awareness, right? I do not think, today, like take a Facebook, for example. It's a great platform. For sure, some bad people might be using that for, in a bad way. But that's okay because the problem will be fixed. But it cannot, because of that, say, oh, you do not use Facebook. I'm using Facebook every day. It's a great platform to connect people all over the world, right? I think just take some time.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to take the long view of what's happening. Like technology certainly has some downsides, but if you look at over the last 30, 40 years, 40% of the people in the world were in extreme poverty, and now only 10, it'll be 0 in 10 years. So things are getting better in a lot of ways. Obviously, some things are getting worse. I mean, one of the things I say on video, of course, you could say, well, that's bad. No people are going to stay at home and not do anything. I mean, a couple of examples. My kids now, they're playing all these, fighting games like Fortnite and so on. And you could say they're not social, but they're online all the time talking, using video with each other. I mean, it's one example. The other example I use is for business is that when people invite me to meetings around the US, I generally say if it's an hour meeting, I don't want to go because for an hour, video can be just as good. But if you invite me to dinner, I'll go anywhere, anytime. Because there's still that serendipity of sitting next to each other and sharing a meal and not talking about business, but being human. So I think you could just use it in a way that, all right, I'm not going on those terrible meetings for an hour where I'm flying somewhere and I have to fly back. But then now I have more time to have more human interactions. That's one example that I give, that I say, all right, that's how I'm using video to use it in a more positive way. So I can have the transactional meetings over video, and then the meetings where you really want to establish a relationship. Yeah, I'll fly to New York to have dinner with you. Sounds crazy, but I think it works.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about the long view, and you say that in time people work it out. Something people don't realize, and it brings us back to video, is that when the printing press was invented, people distrusted it for a century because they could no longer look at the person who was doing the communication. And how could they possibly trust something that was printed and sent all around? And so there was a tremendous distrust of technology. Eventually, we figured out how to trust it. And now in the digital age, where everything can be faked, now we're distrusting digital communications. And maybe part of your point is that's where the video comes in. Much harder to fake a live conversation. I suppose it's theoretically possible, but almost impossible to fake this kind of communication. And it almost takes you back to a pre-printing press era where the communication is as personal as possible, and therefore it makes it more trustworthy.
No, that's an interesting point. I mean, maybe that's why we're so positive about it, is that I think we're kind of bringing humanity back to things that the humanity has been taken out of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Another question from the audience. I think we have gotten to this a little bit, but Scott, someone's asked you to comment a little bit more on the challenge of access to new technologies in general, and especially in remote communities. You've already addressed that a little bit, but you also traveled around the world. You took some time off. You traveled in, 27 different countries with your family and homeschooled your kids. What did you see in those countries on your trip about the capacity of people in remote circumstances to access new technologies?
Yes, after I'd sold my company, I took my kids out of school with my wife and traveled for a year. And I mean, I saw a couple of things. One is, and this was 4 years ago, but still, Wi-Fi is everywhere. So everybody's on the internet. And we were even hiking up to Mount Everest, and there's Wi-Fi up there, guys, so you can't escape.
Right.
I mean, the second thing is mobile phones are everywhere. So there's this, and it's young children who are using it. And as I heard someone say, a young child in Africa has access to more information now than the President of the United States did 30 years ago. So I think you just see a democratizing of information and data through that. And I think it's only getting more robust now through the internet and the cloud. It's a huge transformation. I think we kind of take it for granted here because we all have it, but to see a 14-year-old with a smartphone being able to do the things that our kids do here is pretty amazing.
And Eric, you've spoken about sort of, I think, your confidence, your optimism about the millennial generation and even younger generation, that these things will become so natural that we will avoid and grow out of some of our fears about these things. Can you see that, especially in some of these remote countries, these developing countries, where there's this generation dividend that's happening in Africa, for instance, where the average age is under 30. So you could imagine how that will change an entire continent in time.
I think overall the trend is as you further optimize technology, I think people, I think they will follow. You still take China for example, like 10 years ago you travel there really hard, right? So you need to carry your credit card, it's really hard for the payment. Today actually nobody needs to have a credit card anymore. They all use a smartphone for any payment. No cash, no credit card. Essentially all the people in the rural area, they can have a free life now, right? Just carry their cell phone, they can buy anything. I think it's also will happen, I think, Africa down the road as well. Because otherwise you need to multiple generation technology deploy. It's just that we're ahead of a lot of other countries who already deployed the older generation technology, right? Just to have a smartphone as a new platform. I think when that happens, we drive the user behavior change. All the issues will be fixed by itself.
So make sure we're not too Pollyannish or optimistic. The downside of all that technology diffusing around the world is that there are going to be people in the US and Europe and other developed countries that are now competing with these same people that have the same tools. And there are going to be winners and losers. I think we're seeing that. That's why there's so much tumult around the world, that as much as technology is helping people, some people who had the benefit of geography are now competing against these billions of other people, and their standard of livings are going down. And add AI to it where they're taking jobs away, I think there are potential to be a lot worse. And when people don't feel like they're doing well and their standard of livings go down, that's when you get political instability. And if I show the negative side, I think that's part of why we're seeing political instability today around the world. And I think that will get worse as you see more competition. And part of it, I guess you could say, is through these democratizing tools. So some of it is positive, but it is having a negative effect on some parts of the world.
Well, we can definitely see that now. The age-old tendency for authoritarianism, for isolationism are growing. There need to be some successes. There needs to be some leadership that is not afraid of globalization. And I would hope that the video conferencing successes get at that. I don't know if you saw the Coke commercial that featured the people in Pakistan and the people in India, where you saw that. You could get a Coke in one country and it would show up in another, and you could actually touch hands through video conferencing capability and some sort of AI interface. There's a beautiful example about how those technologies can actually bridge cultures. I don't know how that becomes more effective. I know at the Tech, we would like to be a place that connects with science centers, for instance, around the world, and can actually push past isolationism to a greater sense of globalism and a greater sense of community. But I do think it's going to take that. It would be interesting if you had, once again, any other examples of success like that Coke commercial, or like institutions like the Tech that are connecting globally across governments, whether they like it or not. Do you have any examples of that?
From a museum point of view, or just other cultures?
No, just any example, Scott, where it gets back to what you were saying, where kind of good people can kind of take matters into their own hands because they're going to blow past whatever government conflict is to saying, no, we're going to work together to create this beautiful thing or solve this difficult problem.
I mean, that's one example I've heard in China where people lamenting the fact that people won't go out to dinner anymore, especially people in remote areas. So they're actually creating video conferencing restaurants. So they have the table on both sides, and you make a reservation and you come in and you have a meal, and you do it together over video. And it's a way of having some of that social interaction without losing that, but without having to fly. I think that's kind of an interesting way of taking video, but marrying it with the traditional, I want to have dinner with you, I want to build a relationship.
That's a lovely idea. I've never heard that
Maybe
before.
we need more of that.
That's just in, what country was it?
I've heard of it in China.
Just in China?
Yeah.
What a great idea. Well, we could do that at the Tech. What about you? Some examples where people have just crossed over to create community and maybe create a sense of global community rather than isolationism.
I think one example, there's a company also in China, is called a VIP Kid. This is a great education company. Essentially, you know, their business model is that all the middle school students, when they're back at home, they turn on the video camera, 1 hour, video call with the teacher. Most of the teachers here in the United States, retired teachers, say from Utah, they teach kids for English, for 1 hour. It's created a community because all those teachers, and whenever they have a time, the teacher kids over there. Essentially, almost every kid when back to home, they say, "Oh, I have a very exciting thing. I need to talk with my teacher." And nothing, I think they can learn the English, and plus they build a community.
Yes.
And both sides sometimes travel together to see their students. The students come here to see the teacher. I think the world is getting much better place if you leverage video technology, right, to enable this kind of learning experience.
Yeah. Well, both of those are great examples of what I think you were saying, Scott, which is, to a certain extent, we have to blow past our negative, fearful tendencies toward isolationism, toward authoritarianism, to say, no, global problems are going to require global problem solving and the creation of a global community. We don't have much time left, and we've asked about what your hopes are for the future. There are a couple really specific things we want to say. Zoomtopia is coming here on October 11th and 12th.
It's just across the street.
Just across the street at the convention center.
Yeah.
And of course, if they come to Zoomtopia, they can come to the Tech, which is where we are, right here in San Jose. I'm sure Logitech will be at Zoomtopia. So what do you want to tell us about Zoomtopia and what people should be looking forward to?
First of all, we have Logitech booths, right? We have a great, the new cool stuff. And overall, so it's not only for technology, but overall want to bring our customer together, right? It's kind of enjoy. I know for sure we are going to announce some of the new features, new technology, like a partnership with Logitech for next generation conference solution, and the phone system as well. A lot of cool stuff, like a new virtual background, and also a lot of the announcement. Yeah.
I said 11th and 12th. I was wrong. It's 10th and 11th. Zoomtopia, October 10 and 11 across the street. You guys will be there. When you go to these conferences and people come together, they must go away just full of enthusiasm. I suppose you anticipate that'll happen again this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about it is that people are off doing their own things, and then they come together and they realize that they're sharing some of the same problems and opportunities and successes.
Ideas,
and
best practice, yeah.
Yeah, and you realize that you're not alone. And I think the other thing that's exciting about it is how fast this change is happening. Because if you think about video, it's been a 30, 40-year industry. But I would say even in the last year or two, it's just taking off. And part of it is because it's kind of there and it's easy enough to use. And I think that's part of the main message is that you have to try it. You can't think about the way it was before. I think you gave the example earlier where you tried it 5 or 6 years ago and then you wrote it off and you said it's not good anymore. It's kind of there. So I think it's a very experiential thing. And I think, I don't know your experience. Usually every time I tell someone they think it's great, but 99 out of 100 times people go, wow, I had no idea that I could do that. So I think that's part of our main challenge. It'll get there. It's just a matter of when, right?
Yeah, just awareness.
That's certainly been our experience at the Tech. We've created a bunch of Zoom rooms now. And in fact, our IMAX is a giant domed IMAX, which is one of the larger Zoom rooms in the world. We just had no idea we could do it. We had no idea how good it would be. So Eric and Scott, thanks for coming to the Tech and for talking about how video conferencing actually can transform cultures, maybe even transform a world. Thank you for your good work. And thank you to everybody for joining with us today. This is being recorded, and we will send you a link, and you can send it out to whomever you like. And I hope you will join Zoom. If you want to know more about video conferencing, you can join them at zoom.us or Logitech at logitech.com. And you're always welcome to visit us here at the Tech Museum in San Jose, California. So thanks a lot, everyone. I hope you have a great day.